Okay. This is the Committee on City and Neighborhood Services. This morning, we are having a hearing on Docket 0221, order for a hearing to discuss internet access and digital equity in the city of Boston. The hearing was sponsored by myself, Councilor Mejia, and Councilor Bach. At this time, I am also joined by my colleagues, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Braden, and I will recognize other councilors when they do arrive. This hearing is I'm sorry?
Councilor Murphy's here as well.
Okay. And Councilor Erin Murphy as well. Thank you. This hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/citycouncil-tv. It will be rebroadcast on Comcast Channel 8, RCN 82, Verizon 1964. The Zoom link to provide public testimony for the hearing can be found by emailing ron.cobb, C-O-B-B, @boston.gov. Please make sure that your Zoom handle is your full name. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation and/or residence, and limit your comments to 2 minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. If you are unable to provide public testimony, you may also submit written testimony or a 2-minute video for our record by emailing the committee at ccc.cns@boston.gov or filling out the form on our website within 48 hours following the hearing. I will let the sponsors of the hearing offer brief remarks, then hand it over, and our colleagues as well, then hand it over to the panelists. We will also take public testimony as well. I'm going to withhold my opening statement at this time and give the opportunity for Councilor Mejia and Councilor Bach, who are co-sponsors, to offer an opening statement first. So let me ask Councilor Mejia if you'd like to give an opening statement.
Yes, Councilor Flynn, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the chair and to my co-sponsors for working to bring this hearing together. As the chair of civil rights, it is important for us to view this conversation from the lens of civil rights. Since the pandemic began, our office has worked to ensure that information justice reaches all communities across the city. We secured a budget funding to create a study to explore not whether, but how the city can implement municipal broadband. We have also filed an ordinance in the council to ensure that Zoom meetings, which have been a pathway to engagement for communities across the city, to continue once the pandemic restrictions have been lifted. But we know that there's still so much more that needs to be done. There are large pockets of neighborhoods in Boston, particularly in Black and brown low-income neighborhoods, that do not have access that they need in order to be online. This is an equity issue, and it's at the heart of everything that we as a city should be moving with in terms of urgency to make sure that everyone is able to have reliable internet access as a right, not as a privilege. Thank you so very much to the panelists who are here today, and thank you, Councilor Flynn, for your leadership in this space, and Councilor Bach for joining us.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Next, I'd like to ask Councilor Bach if you'd like to give an opening statement.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and to you and Councilor Mejia for co-sponsoring with me on this. I'd strongly echo Councilor Mejia's statements. To me, the internet and really like strong, reliable broadband access it's a utility. It's completely central to like how people's lives operate in the 21st century. The pandemic certainly has brought that home. And I am concerned that we are that we are still sort of living with the hangover of structuring it much more like an amenity that, people with more money can get better access to. And also where if there isn't the profit motive to improve the network in a part of the city, that it just doesn't happen. And to me, I've said before in other forums like this, we started out with private sewers, we started out with private railways. We found out quickly that like when you have those kinds of public goods, it doesn't necessarily make sense to operate in that kind of patchwork and pay to play sort of way. And I just really think that we need to, in Boston, be moving aggressively to make sure that all of our citizens have access. And it is a civil rights issue, and it's a fundamental civic democracy issue. I mean, if you just think about the election cycle we just had and the number of the forums that were held online and the fact that you literally were sort of blocked out if you didn't have reliable access to that, I just think that that the internet is the entrance point to the public square these days. And so we have a really core government interest in giving everybody access to it. And speed is a huge part of access. And it's embarrassing to me how far behind, frankly, we are a number of other countries on this. And while I would love to see, real like muscular national action, I think that in Boston, we have often had to be the ones who push forward on conceptions of a public good in the past. So very eager for the council to move aggressively in this space, also as a supporter of doing a real study on, the municipal broadband options. I'm glad that we've been able to expand our dark fiber network from the city as much as we have, but I think there's a lot more to do. And just also really grateful for some of the partners on this call. Glad, want to welcome Alex Lawrence back to the city and say we're excited to have you. I know we'll be hearing from you in a minute. And also just to say to Margaret Mckenna, who's the chair of the Human Rights Commission, how much we on the council appreciate the fact-finding work and accountability that her commission has been trying to bring to this issue. So I am very glad to be having this hearing today. And I just think that want to stress that I hope and trust that under the Wu administration that this hearing will be very much the start of a robust conversation that follows up with action and not just a kind of moment for us to all opine on how important internet access is. We got to do something about this. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Bork. Next up, I'd like to ask Councilor Flaherty if you'd like to give an opening statement.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn, for chairing and for co-sponsoring this alongside of Councilors Mejia and Councilor Bork. As stated, obviously, internet access and digital equity are two huge issues in the city of Boston that, as we know, have been put under the flashlight due to COVID. And as we conduct more and more aspects of our daily lives online, it is critical that all individuals and families have access to high quality, affordable internet. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion, and obviously want to identify that we do actually have a great partner. I often talk about partnerships that we have in the city of Boston, and Comcast has been a great partner for the city of Boston. And so there's no problem. I don't think that cannot be solved as we discuss this issue, but it's great to see them on and their willingness to partner with the city, continue to partner with the city, and look forward for other entities to do the same and to step up and to help us as we try to solve this issue. So look forward to hearing the testimony and have questions at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Next, could I ask Councilor Braden?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I echo the comments of my colleagues. Another few issues that, just to put into the conversation about how essential this should be like a public utility, similar to electricity was in days gone by. The health access, increasingly during the pandemic, many of our elders who were needed to have internet access to do telemedicine, to communicate with their doctors. Insurance providers or health insurance providers are not reimbursing for telephone calls to do telemedicine. They expect to have an internet connection with the patient. So, and also we found the whole concern around education. So many of our students, not only in our primary and secondary education, but also in third level education, during the pandemic, were trying to access their virtual classroom using a cell phone, and it was a very unsatisfactory way to proceed. So I really look forward to the conversation. I think it's a moment when we really have to step up and bring our this infrastructure into the 21st century. And so to allow access for all of our communities to internet. So thank you so much. I look forward to the conversation this morning.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Murphy.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. And this is my first committee hearing, so thank you all. I was elected, sworn in last week, so I'm excited to be part of this conversation and also echoing a lot of what the other councilors have said. But knowing as just leaving the classroom and being a classroom teacher through COVID, knowing that, internet access was so important for everyone and that many of our students across the city were unable to access their learning with the remote learning and the Chromebooks and internet instability. And like Councilor Braden mentioned, many students having to go to work with their parents and trying to do lessons on a phone, which then costs their family money with data charges and all. So making sure that, the internet access is available to all and it's equitable. And also the seniors, we know many of the services that they need to access they were expected to do so online, and they did not have not just the equipment, but also the knowledge of, accessing and being able to follow through many of the steps that it took just to maybe schedule an appointment, or even we saw through signing up for the vaccination that it was, not equitable at all. So thank you for having me here at this hearing, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. I will be very brief in my opening statement. Our working class and immigrant families, our communities of color, our seniors, persons with disabilities, residents in Boston Housing Authority and public housing, they need to have the same and equal access to digital equity, to the digital skills as any wealthy family across Greater Boston. This is a civil rights issue, and we need to do better in making sure that those without a voice in society, including digital equity, they're heard, and that their opinion is heard, and that they're able to, for the students as well, that they're able to compete with other students that have the access and the ability with the strong internet. City panel, we have Mike Lynch, who's the director of broadband and cable, do it. Alex Lawrence, who's the chief information officer at Do It. Sarah Figueroa, the chief of staff at Do It. Peter Favorito, I'm sorry. Digital equity and inclusion advocate at Do It. And Margaret Mckenna, chairwoman, Boston Human Rights Commission. Want to say thank you to all of you. I know you provide tremendous leadership on this issue and other issues as well. And as I mentioned, and my colleagues, Liz Braden mentioned, and I believe Council Block and others mentioned, for us, this is a civil rights issue. It's about equal access, and we want to especially say thank you to Margaret Mckenna from the Human Rights Commission for being here, providing strong and positive leadership. I'm proud of the Human Rights Commission, and also is established under Mayor Flynn as well. So just wanted to point that out. Let me start by asking the Do It team to provide an opening statement, and then we'll get to Margaret Mckenna. I'm not sure how many from the Do It team want to speak as part of the opening statement, but let me allow you to choose among yourself what you guys think is the best, okay?
Thanks so much, Councillor Flynn. I'll go ahead and get us started and then turn it over to Mike Lynch. So for those of you I don't know, I'm Alex Lawrence, and I'm the Interim Chief Information Officer for the city's Department of Innovation and Technology. This is day 6 on the job for me. I'm so excited to be here today with all of you and see many of your faces again. I recently took a short 11-month hiatus from working for the city, but prior to that gap, I worked with the Department of Innovation and Technology for almost 7 years. And so, I'm excited here to talk to you about this issue of critical importance. It's one I'm deeply and personally passionate about. And thank you so much, council for prioritizing this issue and for inviting us here today. As you've all remarked so poignantly already today, if we've learned anything over the past 2 years, it's that access to high quality internet is core to how we create a more equitable Boston. And, you know, in today's world, again, as you've remarked, the internet is as essential as all other utilities, and Bostonians deserve high quality access to internet and the tools with which to use it. I'm here with my top-notch team from Do It, who's been working tirelessly on this issue sort of throughout the pandemic and before. I'm going to turn it over in a little bit to Mike Lynch, who's, as Councillor Flynn said, our Director of Broadband and Cable, and I believe is quite a familiar face, I think, to all of the folks here today. He's held this torch for a long time and is leading the charge to move the city forward on this issue. We also have my Chief of Staff, Sarah Figueroa, who's been doing yeoman's work on getting a lot of these initiatives up and running. She's worked closely with the Equity Cabinet, Administration and Finance, and the Mayor's Office to support the Digital Equity Fund and work to support the rest of the work you'll hear about today. Finally, we have Peter Favorito, who I think is a familiar face to all of you, as we stole him from the council. No, I'm joking. We got him from Councillor O'Malley's office, and we're excited to get him on board as our digital equity and inclusion advocate to help people of Boston get access to reliable internet. So we look forward to, as Councillor Bach said, taking concrete action here with the council. And thanks for having us here. And I'll turn it over to Mike Lynch to tell you more about what we've been working on.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Councillor Flynn. And with the chair's permission, I have a slide deck that I'll run through as quick as I can.
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Councillors. Good to see you as I share the screen here. And I think some of you may have seen pieces of the screen before, but pardon me, I'll run through some of this very, very quickly. These are the 4 things that we'd like to touch on. A bit of an update on our broadband digital equity and inclusion study. Federal support for broadband and digital equity, which has changed enormously in the last 12 months, and changes in the new emergency broadband benefit. Some of these slides I think the councilors have seen before, but this is kind of the way we break down digital equity and inclusion. Competition and choice is something Boston has. We have connectivity in the community. We need much more. We need digital tools and we need digital skills. These are definitions we share from the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. I think they're very helpful to help us understand the challenges that people face, and it is beyond having an available internet. It's the tools and the training. As you know, in Boston, we have 3 main landline, if you will, providers: Comcast Xfinity, Fios by Verizon, and RCN Boston. Comcast is universal to the city. Fios is building to be universal to the city. RCN is unique in that they only built out about 1/3 of the city and have been static at that point. You know that we had studies from Age Strong, the Elderly Commission, Boston Public Schools, and the Boston Housing Authority addressing school children, BHA residents, particularly seniors, and vulnerable populations. I am hoping we shared these slides with the council. I believe we did. And I wanted to acknowledge our equity partners. We did an awful lot of work this year, and it would not have been possible without the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement and Vulnerable Citizens, the Equity and Inclusion Cabinet, particularly Natasha White, who has been extraordinarily diligent through all this, and the Office of Workforce Development. Working together, actually this slide is slightly wrong. That has been updated. The emergency broadband benefit enrollments in the city of Boston is now at about 20,000 households. That's a significant jump since last July. The Digital Equity Fund has distributed nearly $500,000 to 19 organizations. Oh, another slide that's slightly out of date. Our digital equity advocate is with us now, Peter Favorito. And the workforce development is working on the Let's Go Better listening campaign. Obviously, the council is key and crucial to all of the work we've done and has been extraordinarily helpful in supporting our digital equity and inclusion agenda. Thank you. This is the study of equity and municipal broadband that we are doing. We're evaluating our current status, kind of a level set. We're evaluating and sampling speeds from the providers. We will provide a platform, if you will. We will stand up a test on Boston's website for people who are curious or frustrated with the speeds that they are getting in their homes. We will conduct a municipal broadband evaluation and study, And we will assess the digital equity and inclusion programs we have on hand, what should be improved, what should be perhaps removed or revamped. I'd like to turn briefly to Sarah Figueroa, if she could touch base a little bit here on the Digital Equity Fund.
Absolutely. So the Digital Equity Fund just is a super kind of brief history. Started in 2018, we were able to award $35,000 to a nonprofit. 2019, we were able to award 3 different grants to 3 nonprofits because that amount was raised to $100,000. Shout out to Castle Square, who I believe might be in this hearing today. And then in 2020, I think we all know, we had a lot of emergency support to kind of provide. So in 2021, we really wanted to make sure that we were dispersing this grant money again. We worked so closely with wonderful partners over at Age Strong. They were able to contribute $150,000 of their funds. We had $100,000. Ultimately, we worked closely with the Equity Cabinet, Age Strong, and Administration and Finance to give out just under $500,000 in grant money to 19 organizations. We focused it a little different. We did mini grants, $5,000 to $35,000, so we could really get people the immediate kind of support they needed. I think we had some really valuable lessons learned from this. We had 100 applications, and we read through each one of them to understand kind of what kind of equipment, access, and training people really needed right now. So just a wonderful, not only the ability to support 19 nonprofits, but also just the lessons we learned have been really valuable in kind of understanding our strategy and how to really get people what they need.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Sarah. Sorry. And briefly, just touching base again on the digital equity study and what our goals are. Right now, we are engaging with the ISPs, the broadband providers in Boston, to gather data on their current systems and the environment in all of Boston. We hope to summarize and evaluate that right after the turn of the new year and make recommendations for expansions and creations of any new digital equity programs. Again, the issues that we hope to address through this study, it probably has 5 goals, and I think we will probably see in the first quarter of 2022 the results of the evaluation of the broadband providers in Boston and subsequent targets through the new year, if you will. One of the things we'd like to touch base on a little bit, of course, are the programs that we currently have available. Wicked Free Wi-Fi, of course, Tech Goes Home, and Theo Hanna is with us today. Thank you very much. The city's been a strong supporter of Tech Goes Home for about 10 years now, and I think we have supported them with about $1 million annually as the council has voted on that every year in the budget process. These are some samples of what we expect will be standing up in terms of the speed test on our City of Boston webpage. And this is sort of an illustration of where we know that we have fiber in the City of Boston. As you can see, it's fairly well spread out throughout the city. Verizon is still building their system. They're probably 2/3 of the way through the fiber build. And Comcast is a hybrid system, if you will, predominantly fiber, but the last mile is often coax. Now, this is a section that we'd like to spend a little time on. As you know, just last week, the state has approved the American Rescue Plan Act for Massachusetts. There's a tremendous amount of funding within that bill. I would say, I think there is a $50 million program for digital equity within that. It will be managed by the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development. It's not exactly clear what that bill looks like right now or how the City of Boston will be able to take advantage of it. Another large bill is the infrastructure bill. One of the challenges to the infrastructure bill is that any area, any geographic area, community that has available capacity of 25 megabit down and 3 megabit up is usually not eligible for many of the programs within the infrastructure bill. The exception to that is the Emergency Broadband Benefits successor program called the Affordable Connectivity Program. There is, this is very, very similar to the emergency broadband benefit we talked to you about in June, and that currently 20,000 Boston residents are now signed on to. The beauty of the Affordable Connectivity Program is that they have raised the threshold of eligibility from 135% of poverty to 200% of poverty. Of course, to pay for that, they've also reduced the affordability from $50 benefit per month to a $30 benefit per month. However, I believe many of the providers, and they're with us here today, will tell you that they have a program that is available in that price range. This is just a little, I'm putting this in here just to show you the big buckets, if you will, that the infrastructure bill provides money to. And then touching a little bit here, I wonder, Peter, would you mind giving us a little bit of a touch base? Peter was part of a call last week with the FCC and other cities on the transition from the emergency broadband benefit to the Affordable Connectivity Plan.
Sure thing. Good morning, counselors and everyone on the call. Thank you, Mike. Basically, yeah, so those who are enrolled in the emergency broadband benefit you can continue, they will automatically be transferred into the Affordable Connectivity Program. And you can still apply for the emergency broadband benefit through the end of February 2022. Now, as Mike mentioned, there are a few differences between the two programs, going from $50 a month to $30 a month in a discount. Also, there will be changes in eligibility requirements. As Mike mentioned, households with an income at or below 200%, the federal poverty guidelines are now eligible. And those who experienced a loss of income due to COVID-19, and if you are eligible for a provider's COVID-19 relief program, they will no longer be accepted as eligibility requirements for the ACP. As mentioned, the program is the application for EBB is still live through end of February 2022, and we've seen a great number of people within the city apply for it and receive funding, and we hope that number continues to increase as we go on.
Thanks, Peter. I just put this in as a reference. Councilors can take a look at this later. These are national samples of who is subscribing to EBB and who will presumably be subscribing going forward to the Affordable Connectivity Plan. You can notice here that at least it looks like 1/3 are doing fixed wireless, and 2/3 in some cases are doing any sort of mobile subscription. This touches on some of the items that Peter had already touched on, so I won't belabor the issue, but it's here for a reference in terms of a side-by-side comparison of the two programs. As you can see, one of the big challenges we have with EBB is the application itself. We talked to the FCC, and we talked to some of the congressional staffers before they made this law and begged it to make it a more simple application. It is not. It's 8 pages. It's very dense. It's very challenging for people who are in need. It would have been great if the FCC had been able to give us an application program where we, the city or a social service agency or community agency or a school, could fill the application out for a household, but they did not give us that opportunity. This has proven to be one of the biggest challenges about this program, and we're looking for ways to help solve that going forward. These are some more information and reference points for both the EBB and the ACP program. And just a note here again, the emergency broadband benefit, I think, is currently serving 20,000 citizens. It was just below that at the end of November. And Comcast Essentials, I believe, is in the vicinity of 20,000 households in Boston. And I think we can wait for Comcast to make their presentation, but they have increased the speeds of the Internet Essentials in homes. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else from DeWitt planning to testify, or should I go right to Margaret Mckenna from Boston Human Rights Commission? Okay, I'm going to ask Margaret Mckenna, who's the chairwoman of the Boston Human Rights Commission, to provide an opening statement. Good to see you, Margaret. Margaret, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn, and thank you to your father for creating this organization as well. So we have been spending quite a bit of time looking at the data. And I guess one of the things I would say is I totally agree that there is inequity in Boston. I think all of us would agree. We have lived it, we have seen it, the schools have seen it. I would not spend any more money trying to prove it unless I was going to sue somebody. So the consultants that the city has hired are going to do tests in 25 households. What that will prove is there are 25 households that have differentiated speed and reliability. It won't prove that the household next to the 25, one of the 25 has differentiated speed or reliability. I wouldn't even bother, to tell you the truth, because that won't, 25 households out of Boston population will not give you an answer in terms of Boston. I would spend the money closing the gap, the inequity gap. And I would not spend the money trying to prove that there is a gap. Also, a lot of what we're trying to do is get information from the providers. I would just ask the providers for the information. They can tell you about speed and reliability, and we should ask them for it. Now, they've been asked for it around the country, have not been very forthcoming, but let's ask for the information from Verizon and Comcast. Let's ask for the information that we need to have to show where there are gaps in speed and reliability around our city. You know, we heard about what I would say about municipal broadband. Let's not let the perfect get in the way of the good. So I think municipal broadband is probably a great answer, but it will take years. And what I'm looking for, and I think we're all looking for, is what can we do now to, in fact, improve the equity in Boston? And I think there are a number of things that we can do. One of the things I heard about choice is that we want to bring choice, but there are a lot of places where there is not choice. Interesting enough, one of the things that wasn't mentioned is, you know, when there is construction for a big building, the providers make exclusive agreements with those buildings. The building I live in has an exclusive agreement with Comcast. When Verizon tried to get in here, it's almost impossible. It's virtually impossible. So there is no competition here where I live because of that, because they can't use common, obviously, fiber that's owned by Comcast. So there are a lot of parts of the city where the only provider is Comcast. There is no competition. So it is continually still a problem and something we should work on. I know Starry is now entered the city, and that's something else we should look at and people should be aware of. I would also say that, as you talked about, and Mike Lynch talked about, and others, about both the existing essentials and the new affordable infrastructure, is that I am pleased to see there are 20,000 households, because the barrier for entry is so difficult. Mike himself mentioned it's 8 pages long, and it's in English and Spanish only. As we know, in our city, there are a lot of other languages, and it is not available in those languages. So what was one of the things we could do now? We could, and I think we should, take some of the money and use it for nonprofits. We have a language program in the mayor's office to translate these, and also nonprofits to give them money give them money to work with other languages to help people fill these out, and actually to reach people and to get the word out more than it is in multiple languages, in simple, clear, about what's available and what it costs. It's very complicated. The burden of getting into one of these programs is unfortunate. And I will say something that's disappointing about the providers, even though the providers are here to listen, I will say it. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying so that individuals would be the people who applied, not nonprofits. And I think it's something now that the providers should take the responsibility for and help us as partners figure out a way to make this easier for people to apply. Join us in figuring it out. Otherwise, I think we lobbied to ensure that others, our nonprofits and others, could apply for people who spoke a different language, who were immigrants and new to the country. Now I would ask our providers to work with us to figure out a better way to do this. I would also say the city has some opportunities here besides municipal broadband, I think. Languages is one, and clear and concise. How do you do this and what does it cost? Public housing. Everybody in Boston public housing is eligible for these opportunities. Everybody. They fit the criteria. What are we doing for them, especially seniors in public housing, but everybody in public? What kind of program can we create that will get every one of our people in public housing eligible and on board for these programs? They're all eligible. If they're in public housing, they're eligible in terms of the criteria. So what are we doing as a city and as nonprofits? What can we put in place to make people eligible? The other thing I would say, and our new mayor put this in her literature, is what about putting Wi-Fi in T-stops, in bus stops? Who rides buses? Who rides the buses? Now the buses are free. What about putting Wi-Fi at bus stops? What about putting Wi-Fi in T? And people are doing this. If you go to other countries, you have free Wi-Fi. And what about increasing Boston free Wi-Fi? Particularly in places where we know the poverty level is high. And as we know, that's where Black and brown people are in Boston. So that's public libraries, bus stops, public housing, and schools, other public buildings. I think municipal Wi-Fi is a great option for the future, and we should look at it, but we should not let that get in the way of a fix now in 2022. Because there are things we can do and ways we should spend our money to close this gap, because this affects, and all of us agree, affects everything. Education, healthcare. Only 15% of people assessing healthcare are doing it with video because they don't have it. Or they can't afford it to use it on the phone. So I don't have to convince all of us. There's nobody in this hearing that has to be convinced. But you should know there is a history of discrimination. When fiber was laid, the first fiber that was laid went up to Mattapan and then went around it. Because I suppose people did not think that Mattapan would be a place that had a lot of economic benefit. So there is a history here of inequity, and it's time that we did something about it, and we did it now. So I really appreciate, Councilor Flynn, you're inviting me to join you, and I want you to know we're here to participate and to help in any way we can, and we're going to continue to be involved in this and collect data and make recommendations. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Margaret, and thank you for your strong and positive leadership. And you play a tremendous role. The Human Rights Commission plays a tremendous role in our city. And just over the last several years, you and the Human Rights Commission were involved in hate crimes against the Asian community. You provided strong leadership against hate crimes, and also reaching out to our immigrant neighbors as well. So I want to say thank you to the Human Rights Commission. Plays a critical role in the city. I have one question, and then I'll let my colleagues ask questions after. Then we'll go into our community and service providers. That's the second panel. So I want to say thank you to them as well. So just following up on what Margaret Mckenna talked about, I want to see, and as Margaret does, and as my colleagues, I represent the largest immigrant community in the city of Boston. I represent the most residents living in public housing of any district council. So let me ask Alex, Alex, what are we going to do to make sure that residents in public housing, say at the Cathedral, that live in older traditional public housing type buildings, what are we going to do to make sure that residents in the Cathedral public housing development and in other locations have equal access to digital equity, as along with, say, residents in Chinatown that live in these large, say like the Mass Pike Towers, they live in large buildings that sometimes they have access to the internet and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they only can have one person on at a time. And then if the other person in their family also in public schools wants to access it, they only could have one at a time. So certainly that immigrant family is falling behind in that case compared to a wealthy family, say, living in the Back Bay area. So digital equity, what are we going to do for public housing residents and for immigrant families?
Yeah, I know that the network to the BHA properties is on a roadmap. So I'm going to, unfortunately, still getting caught up on things. Going to turn it over to Mike to specifically talk about where BHA is on that.
Okay. Hey, Mike, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I wasn't responding. Yes, Councillor, I know Mass Pike Towers, you mentioned, again, not Boston public housing, but affordable housing, and has a big problem. I spoke last year earlier, sorry, I spoke this year to Serene Wong, I think it is, who was the director there, and we were steering her towards a company called NetBlazer. One of the big problems they have for Mass Pike Towers, I recall, was it was very costly for a provider to come in. Some of them were unwilling to do so. NetBlazer has a unique platform, a little bit like the company that Margaret Mckenna mentioned, Starry. They move from building to building using a direct line of sight wireless, which usually solves the problem of the high cost of transmission. I'll go back and check again with Serene and see how their progress is on that. Regarding Boston public housing, the BHA, all of the BHA facilities are wired. Question is, who's taking advantage of it for broadband, and who knows that there are affordable programs out there that can help them? Again, as Margaret said, and as the slides note, this is affordable to all public housing residents. Everybody who can should be taking advantage of it. It was a unique problem during the early days of COVID. People, particularly seniors, were fearful of letting someone into their apartment, into their home in order to fill out applications and stuff like that. Those days have gone by. I think we're at a point now where we can expand that growth. Earlier, Sarah was talking about the Digital Equity Fund. Last year, when we gave out to 19 agencies, many of them actually bought these tablets, hotspots, LTE Chromebooks themselves. There's no need to do that. I think we need these agencies in their languages, in their congregations, to be signing people up for the Affordable Connectivity Program. It is a program that will give free broadband to Boston households for 5 to 10 years. That is a great value to all of our citizens in need. We should make every effort we can to use the Digital Equity Fund to leverage that.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to let my colleagues ask questions now. I just wanted to make one point as the chair. Applications or forms that go out in English and Spanish only is something we can't accept. So as the chair, it is my recommendation to the city and to companies that policy stop, and we immediately begin to put forms out and applications out in various languages. I'm discouraged to hear that, and I hope that won't happen again. Let me go to Councilor Mejia to ask questions. Councilor Mejia?
Yes, thank you, Councilor Flynn. And I'm just so incredibly encouraged by Margaret's testimony. As always, she's bringing in the heat, and I'm here for all of it. So thank you, Margaret, for always showing up as hard as you do. So I just have a few questions. Just curious in regards to our study, and I do agree, we already know what we know, and I understand the reason why we're going with a study, but I'm just curious as we continue to move forward. I'm just wondering how we are involving other community members in this process. In particular, folks, I'm thinking about IBEW 222 and other unions and workers in the city. Like, what role are they playing in informing this work? And then I'm just curious, what programming do we as a city have to help assist people who are not only with just not only internet access, but internet literacy? You know, how are we going about letting people know how to use the internet? I mean, you might think something as simple as that, there may be no need for it, but I know that there's some folks who are just using WhatsApp as a way to communicate. So I think that we have to really start thinking about how important it is for us to understand that not everybody knows how to utilize the internet. And then I think one of the things that I also would like to know a little bit more about is, according to the map presented on the boston.gov website, is that there are 0 wicked Wi-Fi spots in Mattapan in the South End, and very few located across Hyde Park, East Boston, Allston, and Brighton. It seems like an easy short-term solution, and I'm hoping that we can implement getting hotspots in those areas as well. Just curious about what the rollout is for that. And then what are the hurdles to getting that to happen, and how can we make it happen as soon as possible? What is the immediate plan to push for hotspots in these locations, and when will it happen? This is following up on what Margaret was saying as well. I think Margaret pointed out something really important. There are long-term advantages to municipal broadband, that in that it is universal, but it will take so long that there are very few immediate solutions by pushing for that. And there are short-term advantages to current digital equity programs, but they usually rely on people in needing to request access. We need to be, as a council, I think, unified in our push for the administration to implement some of the recommendations that are coming out of this hearing right now, including expanding Wi-Fi to access to T-stops, making broadband universal in BHA housing sites, and so much more. So I just kind of want to point some of those things out. And I'm just curious why we're not using, something that Margaret pointed out, is that we already have a lot of data, including things that she has shared with us. So I'm just curious why we are not using that data and save our money for something else. That's a lot, but I'm hoping that you can unpack those things. Thank you.
Does someone from the Do It team want to try to answer that, please?
Yeah, I can take some of it and then pass some of it on to Mike. I think specifically, to your point, Councillor Mejia, on making sure that our money is going to the best possible places and thinking about using the data. It sounds to me like what we have heard so far is that public Wi-Fi is not the quality access that residents need in order to be able to reliably access the internet. So happy to specifically follow up on that request with Mattapan, but I think we're really trying to look holistically at this to make sure that everything we know is providing folks with quality and reliable access to internet and allows them to do the kinds of things that all of us expect to do on the internet with privacy and security and all of those things. So I just wanted to specifically address that in terms of Wicked Free. And then I'll pass it over to Mike to address the other components.
Thanks, Alex. Yes, Councillor. I think we probably had mentioned it at our Ways and Means hearing back in the spring, but we are finalizing our big fiber expansion in the city, which means at this point, we're literally putting switches inside the buildings that were remained to get connected to the city's network. When that happens, Our next step is to put an antenna on the roof, connect it to the basement, and that antenna, depending on the size of the building, will be a hotspot, a wicket-free Wi-Fi hotspot for that community. This has already happened in the schools and in the libraries. The nuance, the challenge was that when it happened in schools and libraries, their funding, which was federal funding, restricted them from making it available to the public. During COVID, that changed. I'm not sure, I could double check with the schools and libraries to see where they are in the status of that, but they can now provide free Wi-Fi access to the community in which they serve outside of their school, something that was not available until, I think, 6 months ago. In addition to that, I think Angela Holmes on the line from Comcast. She'll talk about a Comcast program called Lyft Zones, which was directed towards our community centers, and I believe is, well, she knows the details. It's in quite a number of them. I think it's in 12, but I'm not exactly sure.
I'm also happy.
Was that my cue?
Let me, I know Margaret McKenna had her. I know Margaret McKenna had her hand up.
Councilor Flynn, why don't we let the Comcast folks respond first?
Okay. Let me ask Angela Holm, who's been on with us in the past. Angela, are you able to give us a kind of an update and or response to that issue question?
So there's been a lot covered. I'm going to do my best to concisely touch on each subject. First, regarding our network and the infrastructure of our network, we do have fiber in every single neighborhood in the city of Boston, and augmenting our network and expanding that fiber is just a part of our business as usual. It's part of our routine business. It's something we're doing all the time. But that's outside of the main point that I want to talk about today, which is our digital equity initiatives and programs that we run out of Comcast. As you can see from the background behind us, we've been doing Internet Essentials now for 10 years. And every time we are before the council, we have more announcements to make. And that holds true today. So just first, I want to touch on the languages that we do offer. So we have a main Internet Essentials line that picks up in English and Spanish. Our online application is available in 7 languages. Our printed material is available in 15 languages. And we have a separate dedicated language line where you can access up to 240 languages. So we recognize the need. We recognize that many in the immigrant community have a distrust and a fear of application processes and what it means to provide your personal information. We're aware of that. We're constantly working towards making it a more comfortable space for people to adopt the programs that we have to offer. And I think that's another critical point that we have to make is the access is there, the infrastructure is there, the program exists. It's the adoption that is not taking place. And the adoption comes down to 3 major components, and that's a computer itself, which we work on all the time, a mix of digital literacy skills, and then the cost of the internet subscription. So the last time we spoke to you, we mentioned that Internet Essentials had been increased in speed to 50/5, still at the $9.95 a month that we've had available since 2011. That has not changed. We will be increasing the upload speed on Internet Essentials again this month to 50/10. We've also noted that in some households, there could be multiple students. And so we created an Internet Essentials Plus program as well that will be at 100/10 for $29.95 a month. So those are both the affordable programs, but nothing has changed about the $9.95 a month Internet Essentials. What has changed due to the pandemic is that we realize that Internet Essentials isn't the answer for everyone, or that not everybody has adopted it or is comfortable enough looking into it. And so we created Lyft Zones. And to that point, Mike, we're actually up to 33 Lyft Zones in the city of Boston. We have partnered with BCYF, and we have, through our team over the last year, installed incredibly high-speed Wi-Fi at these BCYF centers throughout the city. We're also working with nonprofits. This year to date, we have donated $722,000 to our nonprofit partners that work in the digital equity space. That includes partners like Tech Goes Home. We've been working with them for as long as Internet Essentials has been around. We've also expanded the eligibility for Internet Essentials, which Last year, we expanded again to include all low-income individuals. We've now expanded that to Pell Grant recipients. If there are a number of ways that you can be eligible for Internet Essentials, we keep finding new ways to connect more and more people. On that note, we extended our Internet Essentials partnership program with Boston Public Schools. So through the Boston Public Schools and with the help of Mike Lynch, we have an agreement where Boston Public School students have that subscription there already waiting for them. Our next step is the same type of partnership with Age Strong, which is something we've been looking forward to a long time. We're very excited about it. I'd love to get the ball rolling with the Office of Immigrant Advancement, or whatever name that office becomes moving forward. We understand that there are pockets of need, particularly in some neighborhoods, but also with certain demographics. We don't want to leave our seniors behind. We don't want to leave our immigrants behind. Recently, we also partnered with Boston Public Schools Parent University. So, as you may be aware, we've been giving away laptops through BCYF, through BHA, through BPS. But we started realizing, it's these parents that also need the access. There's only so much they can do to help their child through their child's Chromebooks. So we just partnered with Parent University to give away 500 laptops to Parent University participants. And we did that. We kicked it off in person a couple of weeks ago at Latin Academy. Sorry, we have a few more. So we also have our RISE program, which is a small business initiative. You can apply for grants, and it works towards marketing needs and technology upgrades for small businesses. It has been around for about a year now for businesses owned by people of color. Last week, we expanded it to all women-owned businesses as well. All of our COVID policies are still in place with the 60 days free of Internet Essentials. This is us responding to what we are hearing from the people that we serve. So we've increased the speed, we've kept the price the same. We're giving, we're getting these devices to people as fast as we can. But we really need help from city partners, nonprofit partners to help bridge that gap. For us, what we've noticed is it's that next step. I'm too afraid to give my information. Oh, this sounds too good to be true. This is why we work with community stakeholders, nonprofits, Do It, BPS, BCYF, BHA, you name it. I could list the whole alphabet. This is how we actually get to the people that need it. So when you speak of the immigrant community being left behind, or seniors needing this, we're there for it. And any input you can give or advice you can give us on how to reach those individuals is well received. We are committing another 10 years. Over the next 10 years, we've named it Project Up internally, where this is our number one priority for our efforts outside in the communities is closing that digital equity gap.
Well, thank you, Angela. I want to go back to Councilor Mejia, since she is the co-sponsor. Councilor Mejia, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, I'd like to give my time to Margaret Mckenna. So I know that she had her hand up, and so I'll wait till the second round.
Okay.
I would just say that, again, I know there are concerns about public Wi-Fi, versus quality and reliability. But again, I urge, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. Oftentimes something is better than absolutely nothing. So in terms of bus stops and the T and all that, I urge people to think about now rather than waiting. I don't know whether it's 2 years from now. The other thing I would say is the cities that have been successful doing this. I learned this when I was running the largest foundation in America. I learned a hard lesson that it will stick with me forever, which is don't guess what people need. Ask them. And the cities that have been successful in closing the equity gap have forged a coalition of folks, not just the city folks, but community folks, the city folks, gathered them together. It doesn't have to be a huge group to in fact direct. So Comcast isn't guessing or going to 6 different people. There's a coalition of people who say, these are our top needs. And this is what we need you to do now. This is where we need you to direct the attention. The same way with the city, with Do It. is these are our needs. We need now. I mean, when COVID came along, we had such needs in terms of health, right? And the schools. And we did our best. There's no question. People really worked hard. Don't get me wrong. But it seems to me that we've got the mayor's office, we've got the immigrant office, and we've got the diversity office, and we got Mike and Do It, and we've got Comcast trying to figure it out. We got all these different people kind of figure it out. It seems to me that there should be a way, like Detroit did and Chattanooga did and other cities did, that there's a small group of maybe it's a city councilor, maybe it's Mike, and maybe it's Tech goes home and maybe it's DCYF or a couple of the community organizations like Mattapan, who is the worst in terms of equity, to gather together, like not all the time, but once a quarter, and say, here's what we need. Here are our highest needs, so that we can agree on it rather than people guessing. People saying, I think this would be the most important thing. I think we have to decide what's most important. And maybe that can be done through the city council and through hearings. But I just hear people saying this is the most important thing. Other people saying this is the most important thing. The money that goes out to these grants, by the way, from the city comes in through licensing. So this is like our city license is these folks for, public television, basically, not public television, but Comcast and television and stuff. So this money should be going out to close the equity gap. But maybe you guys have a better idea about how do we make sure we are meeting the highest needs, most immediate needs? How do we make sure we do that? And we're not guessing or projecting. I hear Angela from Comcast saying we're trying to do right. But she's talking to 16 different people, right? Trying to figure it out. Isn't there a better way to do that? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Well,
That was a question directed at me or not. We work with a multitude of nonprofits.
Yeah, Angela, very, very briefly, then I'm gonna go to Councilor Buck. You can respond, Angela.
That's it. So it's not really speaking to individuals. Certainly, anytime a resident comes up to me at any event, we do a lot of these in-person coffee hours to try to promote the program and answer any questions that we can, even through hand-holding through the application process. But it's certainly more than an individual one-to-one conversation. It's the number of nonprofits that we work with and educators and organizations and associations that we rely on all of it, ourselves and our partners, to get this.
I wasn't suggesting individuals, by the way. I was suggesting why we have a nonprofit for every human in Boston, by the way. We have more nonprofits per person in Boston than anywhere.
I'm sure.
So, I wasn't suggesting.
Well, we're all ears. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Angela. Let me go next to the other co-sponsor, Councilor Buck, for questioning.
Thank you so much, Councilor Flynn. I think Chief Lawrence was trying to get in, so I'm happy to let her say a word.
Yeah, Chief, you can respond. Then I'm going to go right back to Council Buck. I want to continue with council colleagues' questions.
Absolutely. And I'll make this very quick. I just wanted to offer 2 quick points of clarification. And I'm really excited about the idea of creating a sort of more streamlined across all of the convening power with folks in this room to figure out what is the best way we can truly hear from the community. When I said, what we've heard, I was specifically referring to the Digital Equity Fund, where we got about 100 applications of folks who had specific needs. And what we heard sort of universally through those 100 applications was specifically a desire for in-home high quality internet. But I certainly agree with everything that has been said here about how we widen the sort of conversation here and figure out the best way to reach folks about what is available today and think sort of more strategically about how to not let perfect be the enemy of the good. The other really quick clarification is that for the EBB application, we did have that translated into 11 languages and it's on boston.gov. So it is, I just feel like that's important for everyone here to know. I think the question is really, how do we strategically as a group work to make sure that everybody knows how to find those 11 languages? And, we have plenty of ideas about how to work with our existing community centers and libraries to get that information out, specifically hired Peter with his deep experience in community engagement so that we can reach those communities, but really open to hearing any more ways that we can get that information out to folks.
Thank you, Alex. Let me go directly now to Councilor Bach. Councilor Bach?
Thanks so much, Councilor Flynn. I guess this is a question for, it could be for Mike, it could be for Comcast, but can you walk me through, like, you know, if we're talking about these programs that are at 50 and 5 or 110, like what's the capacity for fiber?
Okay, Angela, I'll start on this one. Fiber itself is probably unlimited in terms of its capacity. 25.3 is unfortunately, is the federal or the national standard. Commissioner Rosenworcel, the new chair, she hasn't committed to it, but I believe that she will make an effort to rise that standard. But all of the federal programming that comes in right now, this year, from the 4 different acts that were passed in this year that address broadband, all of them say a minimum of 25.3. 25.3 would take care of 1, maybe 2 people, 2 kids on Zoom classes at any given time at home. After that, it becomes a bit of a stretch. Angela has said, and I'll defer to her on this, that they have been increasing their capacity beyond the floor of the federal rules.
Yes, we have already, and we will again this month. We started at 25.3. We've increased twice just in the last year. And again, this is due to feedback that we hear, feedback from government entities or customers. And the feedback is, now increase the upload. We've increased the upload. So it's going to be 50/10 this month, which, as Mike mentioned, is above the federal definition. But we understand that the demand is higher than what the federal definition is.
Right. So if I'm paying for, and forgive me, I don't have my bill in front of me, but if I'm paying for high quality fiber internet and I have fiber, running to my house here in Boston, not on any of these programs, what's likely the sort of range of my upload download speeds?
That's something I can get to you in writing, honestly. I can't.
There must be a scale. There must be some scale.
Yeah, we go faster than a gigabit now, and we're hoping to go even faster than that. Is that necessary for everyone? Probably not. But it's really up to the individual household and what they require.
Right. I guess what I really want to stress is that my sense is, right, so it's like, if I've got the market purchasing power, like what I'm likely to be getting for my household today is sort of, something like 10, 20 times what you can get on the Internet Essentials type program. And obviously it sounds like, 40 times what the federal sort of standard is, right? And I just think, like, I have had the personal experience of every time I buy a device, I buy the maximum storage capacity and the maximum speed of all the different things. And always by the time I'm done using the device at the end of 4 or 5 years, it's like really struggling to keep up with where the internet is now, right? So I just think this is not a mystery. Like, we all know this. And it's just obvious that the programs that we have for low-income people are just hugely lagging what people need. And I don't think it's like just that people are buying what they need. I think people are buying what they can afford, right? And then they're taking what they can get from these federal programs. And it's one of the reasons why I just want to stress that for me, it's very concerning that when we look at that graph, Mike, that you threw up, that only 1% of the folks getting the federal program are getting fiber, because I just don't think that the other forms of delivery that we're using are capable of scaling up. Like, even if we just threw a ton of money at asking you all to give everybody a gigabit, right? You couldn't, because you don't have fiber. And I just, I don't see us getting there from here in terms of like real digital equity. And I am concerned that at the federal level, we are subsidizing inadequate service. And frankly, like, it's, paying too much for it at some level. And so I just really want to stress that and not for nothing, I want to land again on Margaret's point. Like, I do think that the services have looked to have it be by individual, this kind of sign up thing, because it misses people. Like, and we saw in the school lunch program, we went from every kid's got to bring in all their forms to, like, thank God in Boston, it's just like you get free lunch. And like, that's the way to actually solve like child hunger, right? And sort of similarly, I just feel like with digital equity, we're going to need to get to a place as a city of saying, like, we're just raising the standards across the whole neighborhood. So I know that's not framed as much as a question, Mr. Chairman, but I just really want to strongly enter that point of view on kind of the field as we see it right now.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. And I just want to remind everybody, the Community and Service Provider Panel, Angela will also be there for that panel, along with Stephanie Lee, who's the Director of State and Local Government Affairs for Verizon, along with Theodora Hanna, the CEO, co-CEO of Tech Goes Home. So there's also another opportunity if we're not able to get questions in at this time. We'll also get questions in at the next panel. Let me continue moving to my colleague. Council Braden had to step off for a hearing, for another meeting. Council Flaherty?
Yes, Councilor Flynn. I just had a couple quick questions. I wanted to ask whether all of our BPS schools have access to high quality internet. I was under the understanding that through BONET, BPS schools were connected to some type of fiber optics network, but I was hoping that someone could speak to the progress on that initiative. And also wanted to ask whether or not, again, my understanding, many internet service providers offer deeply discounted web services. And how are we ensuring that residents know about these services, and what type of advertisement are we reaching out in the many different languages that are spoken in Boston to make people aware of these opportunities? So those are sort of the two questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council Flaherty. Mike or Dewitt? Or Alex?
Sure, I could just address Alex, the BONET. 3 years ago, the City Council approved funding for our Crown Castle fiber lease. It was a 30 years of service on fiber, 3 years to build. We are coming to the closing days of connecting all schools, pretty much all municipal buildings in the city of Boston, with the exception of a couple of work sheds and Public Works and Parks Department. And that fiber will be used for everything we can make it possibly be used for. So thank you very much for that. The few buildings that we couldn't either afford to get to or were prohibited under construction to get to, Verizon came to the rescue in their cable license, and they delivered on those buildings. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 of those buildings are under construction. They'll be done by the end of the year or early next year. That's the same fiber that will be hanging some Wi-Fi off of as we go into 2022.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Michael, did you want to continue?
I thought Alex might. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
So.
Okay, that's good. I'm going to go to Councilor Murphy next, but before I do that, Margaret Mckenna has her hand raised. Margaret?
I just wanted to, Councilor Bach asked a question. I thought I might add one fact to it, which is Back Bay 02199 has the second highest cost internet in the country. Just another fact to throw in here. So you know, so we have sort of an issue with internet. I'm not crying for the 02199 folks, but you should just know it as the second highest cost for internet in the country. And I would think, Kenzie, we're talking about, they would argue, I guess Comcast would argue that it's about 1,200. The speed is about 1,200, but in actuality, it's probably around 650. But it's the highest cost in the second highest cost in the country. Just a fact. Okay, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Next, I'd like to go to Councilor Murphy for questions.
Hi, not really a question, but was thinking when Angela was speaking about all the different programs and different groups that they've been reaching out to. I know during the height of remote learning and students being home, many had to go to, say, a grandparent's or a family member's house. So it's great to see that, the age strong and the seniors are making sure that internet is in their homes, that the parents are also having access and the students too. And even though we've returned to in-person learning, I know many, because the Chromebooks were, handed out, that many teachers are still expecting students to do a lot of their work online. So it's going to continue even though we're back in person. So just hopeful that we're going to continue to make sure that wherever students end up having to do their work, and if it's in, the libraries or cafes, or like someone mentioned earlier, even the bus stops and the T stations. So just looking forward to continuing that conversation about where, students will be and making sure access is there for them wherever they need to be doing their learning. So thank you.
Thank you, Council Murphy. At this time, I'm going to go to the Community and Service Provider panel. This current panel that's on, you're more than welcome to stay on and engage in the conversation if you'd like. And if you want to respond, just raise your hand and I will try to get to you. So I know we had a presentation, kind of an opening statement already from Angela Holm. So let me go next to Theodora Hanna, who's the co-CEO of Tech Goes Home. Followed by her, we will go to Stephanie Lee, who's the Director, State and Local Government Affairs for Verizon.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, counselors, and thank you in particular, Counselors Flynn, Mejia, and Bach. I'm Theodora Hanna, co-CEO of Tech Goes Home. I so appreciate the opportunity to testify today about the vital importance of internet access and digital equity. And I'm proud to represent Tech Goes Home, our instructors, and our learners today. For many students, workers, and families in Boston, digital exclusion was a barrier to opportunity and success long before COVID. The pandemic hasn't created a new problem as much as it has exposed and exacerbated existing digital inequities. At the same time, the pandemic focused public attention on issues related to digital equity and created an unprecedented opportunity to dramatically expand inclusion. Today, as we've already been talking about, thousands of individuals and families across Boston lack access to stable and reliable internet, digital devices, and the skills to use those effectively. This burden is not equally distributed. Persistent digital inequity disproportionately impacts residents of color, residents from low-income households, immigrants, and seniors. Lack of digital access significantly constrains the ability of students to participate in online learning and complete homework, of workers to find and maintain employment, of seniors to access telehealth and other services, of families to remain in touch with loved ones, and so much more. Digital exclusion does not exist in a silo. It is inextricably linked to racial, educational, housing, and economic injustice. For more than 2 decades, Tech Goes Home has been working in collaboration with over 100 community-based partner sites throughout the city to provide digital devices, internet access, and skills training to individuals and families in need. We serve students, adults, seniors, and families throughout Greater Boston from ages 3 to 95, with about 85% of those living right here in the city. 77% of TGH learners have household incomes under $35,000 a year. 34% of the adult learners we work with are unemployed, 90% identify as BIPOC, and nearly 50% are English language learners. When COVID hit, demand for TGH programming increased significantly. At the same time, we were forced to adapt how we reached and engaged learners. We moved to a virtual model and graduated over 3,500 learners from our programs in 2020. And we projected to exceed that total by the end of 2021. As a result of their participation in TGH, thousands of these graduates have been able to better participate in school, work remotely, access critical health information and care, apply for unemployment benefits, and so much more. As we look ahead, not only at the future work for TGH, but at the future of digital equity in Boston, it's clear that we have a unique opportunity to learn important lessons from the pandemic and make investments necessary to significantly expand digital inclusion. COVID-19 underscored the persistent barriers to digital inequity and how those inequities break down along racial, socioeconomic, generational, and even neighborhood lines. Our goal must be to provide affordable, reliable internet for every household in Boston, access to digital devices beyond just cell phones, and culturally responsive digital skills training. All 3 legs of the stool are essential to sustainably addressing digital inequity. Affordable, accessible internet, through ongoing work with ISPs and/or concepts like Municipal Broadband is critical, but must be paired with investments in devices and training. Furthermore, solutions must be co-created with the communities to ensure they are culturally responsive to the specific challenges that individuals and families face, and that resources and information reach those who need the most. I love what you said earlier, Margaret, about not guessing at what people need, but asking them. Mayor Wu and the members of the City Council have a vital role to play. The ongoing distribution of ARPA funding, combined with additional resources from the bipartisan infrastructure framework and other sources, creates enormous potential to invest in effective solutions to digital equity. And we encourage city leaders to prioritize additional funding for both the city's Digital Equity Fund and related efforts by community-based organizations to increase digital access and help people advance their lives. We thank Councilors Flynn, Mejia, and Bach for calling this hearing, and all the members of the City Council who have focused on digital inequity in our city. We hope to see robust investment and a comprehensive citywide strategy for advancing digital equity, and we look forward to supporting and amplifying those efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Theodora. Appreciate your testimony and also the incredible work that Tech Goes Home does across our city, especially our immigrant communities and communities of color. So I want to say thank you to your team. At this time, I would ask Stephanie Lee, again, she's with Verizon, if she'd like to give a opening statement, and then we'll go back to Q&A from council colleagues to this recent panel. So Stephanie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. It's a pleasure to be here. So I am the Director of State and Government Affairs and Public Policy for Verizon in New England. And I have been working with the city of Boston for over a decade and was involved in the early negotiations with the city of Boston leadership back in 2016 when we announced the public-private partnership to bring fiber optics to the entire city to support Fios internet and TV, as well as 5G wireless technology. In addition to that, we also are supporting some smart communities projects that will hopefully bring some more innovation and help the city of Boston run more efficiently through the use of that innovation. Thank you to the City Council and all of the leadership in the city for us to be able to talk about the status of our broadband in the city, but also what we are doing to help bridge the digital divide and address issues of equity. We do share with you those concerns and recognize that broadband networks are critical to our daily lives. As you know, we all, not to reiterate what everyone said, we all saw that in particular over the last 21 months, that it really was a lifeline for citizens to stay connected to services, school, work, and the people they love. For those reasons, Verizon works tirelessly day after day to deploy, maintain, and upgrade our wireline and wireless networks to meet the ever-increasing communications needs of the residents and businesses in Boston and in other areas, of course. We've made a significant investment in Boston to bring our Fios fiber to all neighborhoods. We're investing $600 million to transform Boston into one of the most technologically advanced cities in the nation. We're deploying 100% fiber optic network for Fios high-speed internet and TV in every Boston neighborhood, and that fiber does go to every customer premise. In 2016, we did start our build in Dorchester, Roxbury, and West Roxbury, which was the first wave, and since then have worked our way through every neighborhood in Boston except for the core of the city where we are now. That's our final wave, which we began this year, but that's to bring fiber to Fios in Beacon Hill, downtown, in the financial district. Fios internet rides, as I said, on an all fiber network that goes to each customer premise, and our internet product starts at over 200 megabits per second. We also have packages that exceed gigabit speeds. In addition, Boston became one of Verizon's first 5G wireless cities, and we're continuing to build out that network as well in the city. We turned that on in 2019. While we were building our network to bring physical infrastructure, and Mike Lynch had addressed, we're still building. It is going to be several more years, although we're ahead of schedule. We are built out in about 75% of the communities. That means fiber goes by premises, and about 75% of our neighbors can get actually order service right now, but we're continuing also getting into some of the apartment buildings that we need access to so that we can finish those, and then in the last neighborhoods that I had just mentioned. But we also are committed to digital inclusion issues of adoption and affordability, which we know is critical to making sure everybody is able to take advantage of the digital age. As part of our partnership, Verizon donated $1 million to the Boston Digital Equity Fund to ensure that the city could fund those types of programs that will help with adoption. And I know we discussed some of that today. We also, in the early days of the pandemic, when schools were shuttered, immediately worked with the City of Boston and the Boston Public Schools to provide 4,000 jetpacks and hotspots with 4G LTE wireless data plans to ensure students that needed access were equipped with technology to keep them connected to the classroom virtually. And that came out of some of the partnership agreement work. Then one of the other things we did is we rolled out FiOS Forward, which allows Lifeline eligible low-income households to receive a $20 discount per month on any Verizon Wireless FiOS internet plan. This program means that people can purchase 200 over 200 megabit plans for as low as $19.99 a month for the service with no data caps. And then we also signed up for the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program that's being funded out of the ARPA funds and will continue obviously through the infrastructure bill. And customers can also get up to $50 a month subsidy for any broadband, FiOS broadband service that they choose, or wireless data or phone service that they choose. Additionally, to help address digital equity, Verizon in Massachusetts in 2020 invested $4.1 million to nonprofits across the state. But some of the nonprofits that we do work with that are focused on digital equity and workforce development and other issues that help elevate and help our most vulnerable communities are Tech Goes Home. We also support the Boston Public Library, Boston Public Schools, the Boston Private Industry Council, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, and a myriad of other nonprofits working throughout the city. And then we also created a Verizon Digital Inclusion Initiative for our wireless broadband services that government agencies, including cities, as well as not-for-profits, can make bulk purchases of service plans at a significantly discounted rate and make that available to residents and customers that fit the low income criteria. And then another thing I just wanted to point out, Verizon has doubled down its commitment to the city of Boston, and we just opened up our new state-of-the-art work hub at North Station, which is our epicenter of Verizon research and development, technology, and innovation. And we have more people that are going to be coming into the city because we're consolidating other work locations. And at some point, we'd love to, host people at that meeting when it's a little bit safer to do so as we work through the pandemic. So just wanted to share that we're happy to collaborate. We've enjoyed a partnership with the city. We look forward to continuing the discussion with all of you and the new administration, as well as the City Council and the Human Rights Committee to help address the digital divide in the city and beyond. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. We appreciate the work that you're doing, and thank you for being here with us today. I'm going to withhold questions at this time, but I'm going to go right to my colleagues to see if they have any questions. Let me start with Councilor Mejia, who is a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn, and to the advocates who have been here and the community panel. I'm just curious, I said this earlier, it's one thing for people to have access to the internet, and it's another thing entirely for people to know how to use it. So I'm just curious, what are we doing to educate communities about how the internet works and how they can use it in their daily lives? I'm just curious about some of that.
I'm happy to jump in and share more about how our programs work at Tech Goes Home. That's helpful.
Yes,
That's perfect.
Okay, great. So we partner with, as I said, more than 100 partners throughout our footprint. So often schools, libraries, community centers, nonprofits, organizations that serve the people we want to serve, who are those disproportionately affected by the digital divide. And what we do is we train staff members at those sites to become Tech Goes Home certified instructors, so that they are the front lines of our program. A school teacher, a librarian, a community center staff member, they train their constituents through a 15-hour digital equity training program that is very much tailored to the needs of the specific people in the class. So it looks very different whether we're working with a partner that serves families with young children versus seniors versus adults who are unemployed, and so on. And so we support our partners on the back end, providing the curated resources, the administrative support. We help with the hardware, the computer and internet ordering, that sort of thing. And then our instructors are on the ground teaching critical, life-relevant digital skills to people in their neighborhoods, essentially. So every household going through our program gets a new computer, gets internet access. If they don't have reliable, affordable access already, and they are the judge of that, then we offer to pay for it for a year. And then they also walk away with the foundation of digital skills. Because as you said, it's the access is great and the hardware is great, but if you give someone a book and they don't know how to read, it's going to be a paperweight.
Thank you for that honesty and truth. I Councillor Flynn, I see that Mike has his hand up. I'm not sure if you want to call on him or I can ask one more question. What would you like to?
Yeah, Councilor Mejia, why don't you ask one more question and then we'll get to Mike Lynch right after that.
Okay, great. Thank you. And this is more of it's not so much of a question, but it's more of a recommendation in terms of where we can find people. And I always like to think about all these non-traditional spaces and places where people usually convene. And you would be surprised to set up shop if you set up shop at a barber shop or a hair salon or even a laundromat, where people are held hostage for 45 minutes to an hour because they can't go anywhere. And I'm just curious, just something to think about as you continue to look at community engagement and find spaces and places where people aren't connected. And if there's opportunities there with the administration or some of our community organizations here to really think about outside of the box in terms of how we reach folks. I think that is, I've always seen those spaces and places as prime locations for real community engagement and education. And doing so in native languages, I think that will also help in terms of reaching folks where they're at. And, people might think that it's crazy that I'm asking questions about how people access the internet because everybody believes that folks know how to use smartphones, but you'd be surprised how many folks who are coming here from third world countries or, from other spaces and places that don't have access to the internet or have never even had access to a computer. So while we can sit here in these Zooms and recognize our own privilege, it's also really important to Councillor Flynn's point of a lot of the immigrants that come here with interrupted education, many who don't know how to read and write even in their own native languages, right? So that education The use of visuals and other audio ways of being able to communicate with folks is just as equally as important as we start thinking about access and information justice. So just kind of want to name that and put it out there so we can all ponder on what we can do collectively to ensure that we are being super intentional about not only closing the digital gap, but doing so in a way that leaves no one behind. So thank you.
Mike Lynch.
Thank you, Counselor. I just wanted to echo what Theo was saying when she spoke about Tech Goes Home. If anyone checks the techgoeshome.org website, you'll see that they are dealing with 12 communities in Eastern Massachusetts and cities across the country on providing their program and standing up agencies that are partner with them to provide this training. It's a unique sort of platform. They've been working at it for about 10 years, very, very successfully. And it worked. It started in Boston and it continues to probably, I would guess there's somewhere around 40 to 60 agencies in Boston, churches, social service agencies, et cetera, who are actively involved. They provide the space, they provide the instructor for training, and they provide the connection to the community in all sorts of manners and ways. Councilor Mejia, I don't know if they've done that yet with barbershops and hair salons, but maybe that should be an upcoming program. Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to go to Councilor Bork, but before I do that, I know Councilor Murphy had her hand up. Councilor Murphy? Erin, you're on mute.
I'm here. Thank you. So Theodore, this question is for you for Tech Goes Home. As a Boston public school teacher for all those years, I had so many students and families benefit from your program and go through the training, and it was wonderful to see. And they had access to not just the technology like the iPad or the computer they got to bring home, but also the parents really benefited from that knowledge. So I do applaud that program. And I know as a school teacher, there were one, maybe two, if you were lucky, in what building you were in, where there'd be like a Chromebook card, right? And you'd have to schedule it out in weeks in advance to get it for like one period, say Tuesday at 9, so your children could access. We all know now, though, after the pandemic hit and truckloads of Chromebooks were pulled up to the school department, and every kid now has a Chromebook. And many students finally realized for the first time, like they always had a BPS email, right? Like all of this technology now is in the homes, and wondering how that has kind of changed or what's different with your program now, knowing that so many students now have the Chromebook access, and has that affected your program at all, or how you're scheduling and giving out these resources to families?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the kind words. It's great to hear about your families. It has changed it in some way. I would say yes and no. So from our perspective, a Chromebook going to each student is fantastic and a critical part of the solution. But if the adult of consequence at home or adults in the home are unable to find a job online, work remotely, access critical resources, then the solution for that household is obviously not met. So we think it's imperative to make sure that every member of the household who needs a device has one. So beyond just the student, so that the whole our mantra is sort of support the family to support the student when talking about families and schools specifically. Also, we are aware of the temporary nature of the Chromebook. So the students having ownership temporarily is fantastic, but we're really looking for a permanent solution. But on the other hand, COVID has changed our school partnerships a little bit. We've done a little bit less with schools in COVID than prior to. I think the biggest reason for that is probably just the tremendous barriers and complications schools have been facing through COVID, how much they have been dealing with. But I I wonder if also it's a little bit because at least the students got a Chromebook. So it's sort of, the minimum base is covered. But yeah, we're just looking to make sure that families have all the adequate equipment and skills and access they need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. I'm going to go next to Councilor Bach, an original co-sponsor. Councilor Bach?
Thanks so much, Councilor Flynn. Stephanie, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit. I'm just trying to understand that 75% number. Is that 75% of neighborhoods, 75% of actual like premises? And then when you guys lay this out, what, like, say you come and do a street on Beacon Hill, do you lay it to every premise while you're going up the core of the street and you've, got things dug up and stuff, or not? How does that work?
Sure. Good. Very good question. So that right now would be 75% of households can get it, but there's some caveats to it. So basically, the single family homes are a lot easier to build to because you don't need actual permission. Apartment buildings and condo complexes, you need another layer of permission to be able to bring your equipment into that, even to be ready to serve customers, even if you don't have customers. So we're looking at right now, every neighborhood has fiber going down every street, except for Beacon Hill downtown and the financial district. So the majority of people living in those neighborhoods can get access to FiOS. However, the caveat is that there might be some apartment buildings that we're still trying to get access to. And we always knew that that would take longer to do because you literally have to reach out to property management companies, individual owners, and negotiate. You just can't put your equipment on their building. You have to get access into the building. But if you're in a neighborhood and you live in a home, say you're in Dorchester and you have a 3-family, what would happen is we would bring the fiber to a hub. And if you ordered service, then we would run that fiber from the hub to your apartment, to your condo, to your residence. So when I say that 75% is built, what I mean is that we don't have 75% of the customers, of course, and we don't put equipment on people's houses unless they order service from us. But all they have to do is order it because basically the fiber's right to the pole outside their house. And then we can run it in or their apartment.
Got it. And does that actual connection into somebody's house, like when they go and order it, does that also involve digging up the street?
No, there's different ways to do it. Sometimes it's aerially to the house. You're not digging up their yards at that point. There's been some trenching and thing in the public way, of course, but you're not digging up once you're getting fiber from the pole or even in the underground. If it's underground, they probably have handholds. So they're probably already set up there in their yards or on the sidewalk, and you can serve them through that. So there would not be digging. So when a customer, if we have fiber at a hub in their neighborhood, in your neighborhood, and you call and order service, basically the technician they put what's called a terminal. It's called an ONT. It's an optical network terminal. And it basically is put on your house, and that's what the fiber terminates into. And that's how you get fiber right to your residence. But no, there's no digging at that point. The digging's all done to build the network.
Got it. And since you're continuing to extend into Beacon Hill, just I'll flag that we don't always feel like we get the best updates from the utilities about your plans, intentions, and timelines on that front. So just a flag on the other side.
Our engineering people have been working with some of the architectural associations and the neighborhood associations. So, and I sat in on some initial meetings. We didn't just go into Beacon Hill, for example. We actually had some meetings and make sure that we're complying, because I know there's another layer of complexity in some of those neighborhoods.
But I guess what I'm curious about, and I don't know if you have insight into this or if Mike does, I mean, it strikes me that the fact that, 75% of households in the city, in theory, have access to FiOS, and yet only 1 point something % of the folks using EBB are on fiber. suggests to me that not very many of our low income households are actually getting hooked up to that existing fiber network. Do you know what I mean? Just because if they were on fiber, then that would drive up the EBB numbers on fiber. So it seems like even though we've got this coverage across all these neighborhoods, the actual connection to our lower income households onto fiber isn't really happening at scale, that's what I deduced from those numbers.
And Verizon does participate, and you can access it as a new or an existing FiOS customer. So it is available, not to mention we do have that FiOS Forward, the Lifeline product that had predated the EBB. So I can't speak because I don't have the numbers on specific adoption. Maybe Mike, you have a better view of the city, but people should be taking advantage of it because I think, again, it's probably the awareness factor and the adoptability factor that maybe we all can work on a little bit more together, because we want them to take advantage of this service. It's a great service. It's fiber, and it starts at over 200 megabits. So they can do really whatever they need to do, no matter how many people are in their household.
Mike, do you have any insight on this?
Council, I'm not 100% sure. I can tell you just a couple of things. I think in one of the slides I referenced, the FCC has put out a little bit of a snapshot on who's taking advantage of it. And it looks like 2/3 of the households that take advantage of the subsidized EBB program are going for a mobile solution. They're going for a tablet, a hotspot, an LTE-enabled Chromebook, something along those lines that's mobile and with them. We can make an assumption that life is mobile, right? People are at work, they're at school, kids are staying someplace other than home between school and the end of the day, whatever it is. And that might be the choice, so during their waking hours, they're on the road, so to speak. Another thing is that I suspect, and I'm not really sure, but TracFone was a very big provider of Lifeline. And there are others as well. And Lifeline was the telephone service. Remember the $20 subsidized telephone service that's been available for, I think, 15 years. That service is is given the opportunity, kind of like a one-check option. If you're already on Lifeline and you want the emergency broadband benefit, it's a simple one-step, yes, I'll take that, because you've already gone through the application process for Lifeline, so it automatically extends to the emergency broadband benefit. So I suspect that what has happened is that wireless providers have seen this, gone back to their customers, say, hey, you want to upgrade? You want to have a smart plan on your phone? We can give you a new phone and mobile data plan on your phone. Just say yes and we're done. And I think that's probably the way the program has evolved. I'm speculating here, and I don't want to put Stephanie on the spot. I have no idea if she has any more insight. So.
All I can add is Mike is right. Companies, Verizon has opted into the EBB also for wireless data and voice. So customers, you can't get EBB for both. If you're a customer, you have to make a choice for the subsidy. So it looks like with the options, people just depending on their lifestyle are making different decisions. And the only thing I will add is Verizon did just acquire TracFone 2 weeks ago. That acquisition went through, so we could be in the prepaid value space, and TracFone will run over the Verizon network as well as our 5G network as it continues to roll out. So those customers will have access to that network. And we are going to keep the Lifeline discount that Mike laid out.
Yeah, I guess I just think that even if we take aside the fact that a bunch of people are opting for mobile, and I would say to me, it seems very likely that a lot of people are just, mobile's what they've got, right? And so it's sort of easy to sign up and like compared to saying, hey, I'd like you to extend FiOS to my home, and also I'm going to implement the EBB thing at the same time. And this would obviously go as well on the Comcast side for fiber, right? I mean, it's just like, it makes sense to me that a lot of people like the low-hanging fruit solutions, the mobile one, but even within that third that's doing it to a fixed thing, if you then take the 1.8%, that's 5% of the people. I mean, if there's a thing that I want to stress out of this hearing, it is my concern that even with our subsidy programs, we are creating a 2-track like provision of digital access in this city. And I think this, and this is nationwide. I mean, but I'm really concerned about the idea. Like, I'm very glad that you don't get like, lighter flow water if you're a lower income person in the city of Boston. And I just feel like fundamentally, like, even as we build out fiber, right? If 75% of households could in theory have it, and only 5% of the folks choosing fixed access on an EBB program are taking it, it tells me that there's a huge gap in who's actually accessing the stuff that's really built for the modern internet economy. And I feel like we're going to get trapped. And I want to land on what Alex said about the idea that when we actually hear from people, this at-home internet is key. And I just think, I mean, yes, we should have great Wi-Fi all over the public spaces. That's important. But like, we all know that, I mean, we've like, you can't take this, I can't go take this video call in a T-stop. If I do, then it's a circus, right? Like, and I think we've all had the experience of needing to be able to control, like have a controlled space that we have high quality access to in order to hold down jobs and schooling. And I just really want to enter my concern that that we can't get there from here on the kind of set of programs that we've got at the speeds that we're offering them at. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my main comment on that. You're muted, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Bork. I'm just looking, I don't believe I have any other colleagues that are on. So I'm going to go directly to councilors that may want to give a final closing statement. I'm going to start with Councilor Mejia. I'll go to Councilor Bork, and then I'll go to Councilor Murphy. So let me start. I'm not going to give a closing statement, but let me start with Councilor Mejia.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn and Councilor Bach, and all of our panelists for joining us here today. I think pretty much I had my closing statements when I just shared the rally call in terms of what we need to do next moving forward, and just really incredibly encouraged by the dialogue that we had here today. And I think that Margaret was really instrumental in helping us ground this conversation in the sense of urgency in which we need to move in. So looking forward to not only continuing the conversation, but actually putting together an action plan with measurable outcomes that we can hold ourselves accountable to as we continue to move forward. Thank you, Councilor Flynn, for your leadership and for being such a fierce advocate when it comes to all things dealing with our immigrant communities and equity. And Councilor Bach for always bringing all the great questions. I'm surprised you didn't have a PowerPoint presentation for us today, but really grateful that we get to do this in partnership, and happy to see my colleague, Councilor Murphy, in her first hearing, and doing so in something that I know that she deeply cares about. So thank you all. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And after we do Councilor Bach and Councilor Murphy, I'm going to also check to see if there's any public testimony. So having said that, let me go to Councilor Bach, who's the co-chair of this hearing. Thank you, Councilor Bach, and thank you for your leadership on this important issue.
Thank you, Chairman Flynn. And yeah, thanks to you and to Councilor Mejia for co-sponsoring. I think like we all see this thing from different angles, but it's just so clearly one of the biggest equity and access issues in our city. And I just really want to stress, like, I think it's both about equity, giving everyone access no matter what neighborhood they live in, no matter what their income is, whether they're in BHA housing or whatever, but it's also about raising the overall level, right? I mean, what I talked about at the start is that there are other cities around the world where the average internet access is just way better. And I feel like we're sort of stuck in this uncanny valley where it's like too expensive and also not good enough. And I say that with due respect to the providers who I think like have talked today about a lot of the efforts that you're making. I just sort of feel like we're kind of trapped in this crux where I don't see the highest quality access that's going to allow people to really participate in the 21st century economy getting out across the city in the way that it needs to. So I think that when, you have something that becomes like a utility like this and the city sort of sees the way in which the private patchwork isn't getting there, like it means that there's a need for a more muscular, more robust public role. And that's something that, I'm hoping that the city of Boston is going to grab by the horns and really take action steps on in the coming months and years. So definitely looking to partner with Do It on this and with my co-sponsors. And I just think that this is a 100-year issue. And when you look at it in that scale, then nothing that's sort of hard or expensive or tricky for us to figure out right now is not worth doing. So I just really want to stress that this to me is the beginning of a conversation. And again, grateful to everyone's partnership. And yes, also great to be on a hearing with Councillor Murphy, who we're thrilled to have bringing us up to full strength here on the council. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Block. Councilor Murphy.
Hi, so thank you, everyone, and thank you to all my colleagues for their leadership on this very important issue. And I just want to quickly just say, I do believe it's our job to make sure that we're not leaving any neighborhood, any individuals, anyone behind as we move forward. And this digital divide can't just keep growing deeper. So I look forward to this continued conversation and making sure that we're working together and making sure we're coming up with some great solutions so that everyone has access to, not just the students, but, seeing this as a bigger picture, not just kids learning and education, but also seniors accessing important resources across the city. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. I know we have 2 people in the waiting room. Not sure if they're here to testify or not, but Kerry from Central Staff or Ron from Central Staff, can we check to see if the 2 people that they want to testify or not?
Yes, Counselor. If they raise their hand, Kerry can just move them over.
Okay. Yeah, if people that want to testify, if you want to raise your hand, please raise your hand now, and we will get to you for public testimony.
I see no raised hands, Counselor.
Okay. Well, at this time, I want to say thank you to Ron and Kerry from Central Staff and Shane also as well from Central Staff. They did an outstanding job. I want to say thank you to the Mayor's Office for working closely with us on this important issue. I know this was also an important issue Councilor Wu, now Mayor Wu, focused on as a city councilor, and I know she'll continue to work closely with the council in expanding digital equity for all of the residents across the city. I also want to thank the administration staff for being here, from the Do It team, Mike Lynch, Alex Lawrence, Sarah Figueroa, Peter Favorito, and also from the Boston Human Rights Commission, Margaret Mckenna. Thank you for being here. The community and service provider panel was also excellent. I want to thank them, including Theodora Hannah from Tech Goes Home. They do incredible work in our city. Stephanie Lee from Verizon and Angela Home from Comcast. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, for your testimony, for your leadership. And at this time, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.